Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder. Audiobook by Cynna. Chapter 21.
Why?
Nix placed the candle among the cobwebs lacing the tabletop.
Why am I always the smartest one?
He stepped closer. I kicked again, but he blocked it with ease.
Why haven't my attempts to discourage you worked?
In the flicker of the candlelight, he moved. The edge of his knife pressed against my throat.
Maybe I need to be more obvious.
The smells of boiled cabbage and body odor penetrated my nose. Keeping my body still, I asked in the most neutral and unfrightened voice I could manage. What's your problem?
My problem is that no one sees you as a threat. But I'm smarter than Ari, Janko, and Marine. I'm even smarter than Valek, aren't I?
When I failed to respond, Nix added pressure to the knife.
Aren't I?
A thin line of pain burned across my neck. Yes, I replied. In the air behind Nix, Reyad's ghost coalesced out of the dust motes, sporting a smug smile.
My boss wants you to stop training. I'm not allowed to kill you. Pity.
Nix stroked my face with his free hand.
I'm here to warn you off.
Parfit? Why would he care? As I tried to distract him, my mind frantically shuffled through my brief sessions with Ari on knife defense. Damn, I thought. Why hadn't I paid more attention?
He doesn't care. The only thing Qdoyle Parfait cares about is getting promoted. But General Brazil has a keen interest in your new hobby.
Nix thrust his free hand between my legs and leaned his body against mine. For a terrified second, I froze. Panic erased all techniques of self-defense from my mind. A soft buzzing began to grow inside my head, but I stifled it, pushed it away, and it transformed into a simple musical scale of notes. Calm flowed. The necessary defense moves appeared before my eyes. I moaned and rocked my hips, widening my stance. Nix smiled with delight.
You're just the whore I thought you'd be. Now, remember, you're to be punished.
His upper thigh replaced his hand. He began to tug at my belt. I rubbed my knee between his legs, then rammed it straight up into his groin. Grunting, Nix doubled over. I grabbed his blade with both hands to prevent it from biting farther into my throat. Ari's practical voice,
"Better to cut your hands than your neck,"
echoed in my head, even as I winced at the sharp pain. Focusing on the knife, I pushed the weapon from me. Nix stumbled back.
Bitch!
He snarled and pulled his arm back to swing the knife. As the blade swept toward me, I stepped in close to his body, so when I turned, my right shoulder brushed his chest. Using the edges of my opened hands, I struck his upper and lower arm. The combined force of my strike and his swing made Nix's arm go limp. The weapon clattered to the floor. Grabbing his arm, I twisted it until the heel of his hand pointed toward the ceiling. Then I pivoted, placing my right shoulder under his elbow. With all my might, I yanked his hand down. I heard a loud crack, followed by a scream, as Nix's arm broke. Spinning around to face him, I punched him twice in the nose. Blood gushed out. While he was off balance, I kicked his kneecap, breaking it. Nix crumpled to the ground. I danced around him, kicking him in the ribs. My blood hummed and sizzled. His weak attempts to block me only fueled my frenzy. In that state of mind, I might have killed him. Reyad's ghost cheered me on.
"That's it, Yelena,"
he urged.
"Kill another man, and it's the noose for sure."
Somehow, his words reached the rational part of my mind, and I stopped, breathing hard. Nix was still. I knelt beside him and felt for a pulse. A strong throb met my fingertips. The relief that coursed through me vanished when Nix clutched my elbow. I yelped and punched him in the face. His grip relaxed, and I pulled my arm free. Snatching the knife from the floor, I took Janko's often repeated advice for self-defense. Hit and get. I ran. But this time, fear didn't follow me. I ran with imaginary scarlet wings flowing behind me. Moving fast to ward off the shakes that threatened to overpower me, I reached the baths. They were empty at this time of day, so I hid Nyx's knife under one of the towel tables. I checked the extent of my wounds in the mirror. The cut on my neck had stopped bleeding, but 2 deep gashes on my palms looked serious enough to require the medic's attention. There was also a wild, unrecognizable shine to my eyes, as if I had turned feral. I bared my teeth and thought, now who's the rat? Pondering my next move, I wavered. The commander expected me to taste his dinner, but I couldn't bleed all over his food. My initial surge of energy from the fight with Nyx was waning. A wave of dizziness swelled. I headed toward the infirmary, hoping to reach it before I passed out. Medic Mommy gave me a quick appraisal. She pointed to an examining table. I perched on the edge and held my hands out for inspection.
How?
She started. Broken glass, I said. She nodded, lips pressed tight in thought.
I'll get my medkit.
I stretched out on the bed when she returned with her metal tray full of instruments. A jar of Rand's glue seemed out of place among the medical supplies, like a child's toy, surrounded by adult paraphernalia. My hands had started to throb, and I dreaded the medic's ministrations. I turned my head, in time to see Valek burst into the infirmary. Just what I needed, I thought, sighing. This had turned out to be one hell of a bad day.
What happened?
Valek demanded. I glanced at the medic. She took my right hand and began to clean my wound.
Broken glass leaves jagged lacerations. These clean slices are obviously from a knife. I'm required to report it.
The medic had reported me to Valek, and he wasn't going to leave without an answer. With resignation, I focused on him, hoping to distract myself from the pain in my hands. I was attacked.
By who?
His tone sharp. I cut my eyes at the medic, and Valek understood.
Could you excuse us for a minute?
He asked her. She pursed her lips, as if considering his request. Her authority overruled Valek's for all medical situations.
5 minutes,
she ordered, and walked to her desk on the far side of the infirmary.
Who?
Valek repeated. Nyx, a Garden Parfit's unit. Said he worked for Brazil, and warned me to stop training.
I'll kill him.
The intensity of Valek's voice shocked and alarmed me. No, you won't, I said, trying to sound firm. You'll use him. He's a link to Brazil. His hard blue eyes found mine, and held my gaze, probing deep.
Where did he attack you?
A storeroom, about 4 or 5 doors up from our training room.
He's probably long gone by now. I'll send someone to the barracks.
He won't be there.
Why not?
Valek gave me a look that reminded me of the commander. His eyebrows were raised in an effort to suppress his emotions, inviting me to continue. If he's not in the storeroom, he won't have gotten far. You might want to send a couple of men.
I see.
Valek paused.
So your training has been progressing to your satisfaction.
Better than expected. Valek left the infirmary. Medic Mommy, the stoolie, returned to my side. Next time, I thought bitterly, I'll heal myself and avoid being betrayed by the medic. I still had a jar of Rand's glue in my backpack. How hard could it be to seal a couple of cuts? I chewed on my lower lip while she finished cleaning and sealing my cuts. Wrapping bandages tightly around my hands, she gave me instructions that would allow them to heal. No immersion in water for a day, no lifting or writing for a week. And that meant no training for a while, I thought. Valek's men entered. They dumped Nyx onto another examining table. The medic shot me a quizzical expression. Then she bustled over to Nyx's groaning form, giving me the perfect opportunity to leave. I hurried to the commander's office, but Valek had beaten me there. He closed the door behind him as he joined me in the throne room.
I've taken care of dinner,
he said, guiding me back through the maze of desks. It was early evening, and only a handful of advisors were working.
Find Margg and cancel tonight's meeting, then go back to our suite and get some rest,
he said. Cancel? What for? It would look suspicious. I'll wear gloves to cover the bandages. It's cold enough at night. Nobody will notice. When he didn't reply, I added, I'm fine. He smiled.
You should take a look at yourself in a mirror.
He hesitated, his face creasing in indecision.
All right, we'll proceed as planned.
We stopped at the door to Valek's office.
I have some work to finish. Rest and don't worry, I'll be close by tonight.
He inserted his key. Valek?
Yes.
What will happen to Nyx?
We'll patch him up, threaten him with years in the dungeon if he doesn't cooperate, and when he's done helping us, I'll reassign him to MD1. Good enough? Or should I kill him?
Military District 1 was the coldest, bleakest district in Ixia. The possibility of Nyx falling prey to a snowcat brought a wicked grin to my face. No, reassignment's good. If I had wanted him dead, I would have done it myself. Valek straightened his spine, snapping me a look. A combination of surprise, amusement, and wariness over my comment flashed across his face before he reined in his emotions and was once again my stone-faced Valek. I smiled my best Janko impression and headed down the hall. Resting would have to wait, since I had a number of errands to run before the evening's meeting. First, I needed a pair of gloves and a cloak. As the cooling season dwindled toward the cold season, the nights had turned sharp and brisk, coating everything in a blanket of ice so that the blades of grass sparkled like diamonds when touched by the morning sun. Thanking fate that Yelena was still in her sewing room, I chatted with her about the latest gossip before I made my request.
My goodness,
she said, sounding like a worried matron.
You don't have any clothes for the cold.
She bustled about her stacks of uniforms. Her soft, honey-colored ringlets bounced with each movement.
Why didn't you come to me sooner?
She admonished. I laughed. I haven't needed them till now. Yelena, do you mother everyone in the castle? She stopped piling clothes to look at me.
No, dear, just the ones that need it.
Thanks, I said in a tone of affectionate sarcasm. By the time she was through outfitting me for the cold season, I was inundated with a heap of clothing. With all of the flannel undergarments, wool socks, and heavy boots, I probably could survive on the pack ice for weeks. I stashed the pile into a corner of the room and asked Yelena to have someone deliver them to Valek's suite.
Still there?
She asked with a grin. For now, but I think when things settle down, I'll be back in my old room. When, I thought sourly. It was more like if. I selected a heavy black cloak from the stack, tucked black wool gloves into its deep pockets, and then draped it over my arm. The cloak had 2 hand-sized red diamonds stitched on the left breast, and an oversized hood whose function was more to keep the rain off my face than to keep my head warm.
I think you'll be there a long time,
Yelena said. Why?
I believe Valek's sweet on you. I've never seen him take such an interest in a food taster before. He usually trains them and leaves them alone. If there was any potential for trouble, he would assign one of his sneaks to spy on the taster, but he wouldn't bother with him personally, let alone live with one.
Her face had the avid glow of a gossip at full steam. You're crazy. Deluded.
In fact, he's never taken an interest in a woman before. I was beginning to suspect he might prefer one of his male sneaks, but now...
She paused dramatically.
Now we have the lovely, intelligent Yelena to get Valek's cold heart pumping.
You really should get out of your sewing room more. You need fresh air. And a dose of reality, I said, knowing better than to believe a word Yelena said, but unable to control the silly little grin on my face. Her sweet, melodious laughter followed me into the hallway.
You know I'm right,
she called. The only reason Valek was interested in me, I thought, as I walked through the dim corridors, was because I was a puzzle for him to solve. Once he thought he had all the answers about the Southern Magician and Brazel, I'd be sent back to my room in the servants' wing. I couldn't let myself believe anything else. It was one thing for me to have a harmless infatuation that wouldn't have any influence on my plans. It wouldn't. Absolutely not. To think he felt the same toward me would be disastrous. So I tried to convince myself that Yelena, although a sweetheart, was a victim of her own overactive imagination and was mistaken. I tried very hard. I tried all the way to the kitchen. I tried when I saw Rand lurching around his ovens, reminding myself that Valek was ruthless, murdering dozens of people. The king's blood still adorned Valek's knife. Valek was deadly, moody, and exasperating. But for some reason, I couldn't get that silly grin to go away, no matter how hard I tried. Draping my cloak over a stool, I helped myself to a late dinner. Rand finished spinning his pigs and pulled up a stool beside me. My mouth watered at the smell of roasting pork. "What's the occasion?" I asked. Pork roast was a rare meal, requiring an entire day to cook, and served only at special times.
General's coming to visit this week. All my special dishes have been requested. I've also been ordered to prepare a feast for next week. A feast! We haven't had one of those since...
He shook his head, pursing his lips.
Actually, we've never had one with the commander in charge.
Rand sighed.
I won't have any time to experiment.
Would you have time to look at these? Pulling a handful of the mystery beans out of my pocket, I handed them to Rand. I had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to show them to him. I found them in an old storeroom, and I thought maybe they were your coffee beans. He immediately ducked his head and took a deep sniff of the beans.
No, unfortunately not. I don't know what these are. Coffee beans are smooth and have a rounder shape. These are oval, see? And bumpy.
Rand spread them out on the table and picked one up. He bit into it. Chewing, he cringed at the bitter taste.
I've never seen or tasted anything like this. Where did you find them?
Somewhere on the castle's lower level. Oh well, I thought. It had been worth a try. My disappointment pressed on my shoulders. I had hoped to solve this puzzle for Commander Ambrose, but it looked as though I had hit another dead end. Rand must have sensed my frustration.
Important?
He inquired. I nodded.
Tell you what,
he said.
Leave this here and after the feast I'll work on them for you.
Work?
I'll try grinding, cooking and boiling the beans. Ingredients can change their flavor and texture when you add heat and these might turn into something I recognize, alright?
I don't want to inconvenience you.
Nonsense, I like a challenge. Besides, after the feast I'll be back to my daily routine anyhow and this will give me a project to look forward to.
He funneled the beans into a jar and placed it high on a shelf full of other strange edibles, similarly encased in their own glass jars. We discussed menu options for the feast until Rand needed to turn his pigs again. A quarter turn every hour, he said, reminding me that my time to meet Margg was fast approaching. A small pang of nervousness touched my stomach as I bade Rand good night. I stopped by the baths, intending to retrieve Nyx's knife, but there were too many people there. Maybe being unarmed would be for the best, I told myself, as I tried to calm the butterflies in my stomach. Maybe they would search me. If they found a weapon, I might be in more trouble. Margg wore her usual expression of distaste when I met her just past the south gate of the castle complex. We exchanged insults by way of greeting, and continued the walk into Castletown in silence. I hoped Valek was close behind, but I knew better than to glance over my shoulder and make Margg wary. Stars decorated the night sky, and the full face of the moon shone brightly, casting shadows. The road to town was grooved with ruts from wagon wheels, and worn smooth by the passage of many boots. I took a deep breath of the cool night air, and felt a sense of renewal, as the heavy scent of earth and dried leaves cleansed my lungs. At the outskirts of town, I saw neat rows of 4-story wooden buildings. I was struck by their symmetry. I had grown so accustomed to the wild, asymmetrical style of the castle, with its windows of every geometric shape, that the ordinary plainness of town seemed bizarre. Even the placement of businesses among the residences had been planned in a logical manner. The few townspeople that I spotted on the street walked with a purpose. Nobody hung about, or talked, or looked as if they were out for a casual stroll. Nobody, except the town's guards. Soldiers who had once played a major part in the takeover had been reassigned as policemen for the towns throughout the territory of Ixia. Enforcing curfew and the dress code, they dealt justice in accordance with the code of behavior by checking papers, arranging transfers, and making arrests. Every visitor to each town was required to report to the main station to complete the proper paperwork before seeking lodging. Our meeting had been carefully scheduled to give us time to return to the castle before our presence on the street would be viewed with suspicion. The pairs of soldiers stationed on the streets followed us with their gazes. I felt my skin prickle under their scrutiny, and I had myself half convinced that they would swoop down on us at any moment. In the middle of a street, free from guards, Margg came to a stop at a house indistinguishable from its neighbors. She knocked twice on the door. After a pause, the door swung inward, and a tall, red-haired woman in an innkeeper's uniform poked her head out. Glancing at Margg, she nodded in recognition. She had a sharp, sloping nose, which guided the movements of her head as she pointed her face at me. Her dark eyes rested upon me with an intensity that made me want to fidget. A bead of sweat trickled down my spine. Finally, she pulled her nose away to look down the street. Sniffing for a trap, I guessed. Apparently satisfied, she opened the door wider and let us in. Still, no one spoke as we proceeded up 3 flights of steps. The top floor of the house was ablaze with light, and I squinted in the harsh brightness. A profusion of candles ringed the room on multiple levels, heating the air with a smoky scent of apples. I glanced at the window. With the amount of light in the room, I was sure it would spill out into the street, but black curtains covered the glass and pooled on the floor. Bookshelves, a desk, and a scattering of comfortable armchairs led me to believe that the room was used as a study. The woman who had let us in sat behind the desk. Odd metal statues that resembled lanterns with rings around the top graced each side. Other strange and gleaming objects had been artfully arranged on shelves and tabletops. Some even hung from the ceiling. These spun in the air, stirred by our passage. The sharp-nosed woman didn't offer us a seat, so Margg and I stood before her desk. Most of her ruby hair was confined in a bun, but small, curly wisps had sprung free.
"The food taster,"
she said, with a satisfied curl to her lip.
"I knew it was only a matter of time before I had you in my employ."
"Who are you?" My bluntness informed her that I wouldn't tolerate games.
"You can call me Captain Star."
I looked at her innkeeper's uniform.
"I'm not part of Ambrose's military. I have my own. Has Margg explained how I work?"
"Yes."
"Good. This will be a simple exchange. This isn't a social call. I don't want gossip or hearsay. And don't inquire about my business or about me. All you need to know is my name. Agreed?"
"Agreed." Since I wanted to gain her trust, I wasn't about to cause any trouble. At least, not yet.
"Good. What you got?"
With her nose leading the way, she leaned forward in her chair. "The commander has changed his successor," I said. Star's body stilled as she absorbed this tidbit. I glanced at Margg, who looked shocked and annoyed that I had such interesting news.
"How do you know?"
Star asked. I overheard the commander and Valek talking.
"Ah, yes. Valek."
Star tilted her nose at me.
"Why are you living in his apartment?"
"None of your business," I said with a firm tone.
"So, why should I trust you?"
"Because Valek would kill me if he knew I was here. You know it as well as I do. How much is my information worth?" Star opened a black velvet purse and pulled out 1 gold coin. She tossed the coin to me, like a master would throw a bone to a dog. I snatched it from the air, suppressing a wince. The cuts on my hands started to throb.
"You're 15%.
She sent 1 silver and 1 copper coin flying at Margg, who knew Star's ways and caught them easily.
"Anything else?"
Star asked me. "Not at this time."
"When you have something for me, tell Margg. She'll arrange another meeting."
Dismissed, I followed the silent Margg out of the house and down the street. Just as she guided me into a dark alley, Valek appeared out of the shadows. Before I could wonder why, he pulled me through a doorway and into a small room. I was surprised and confused by his sudden arrival. I had thought he would wait a while before arresting Margg. She had followed me into the room and stood with a sneering grin on her round face. It was the closest expression to pleasure that I had ever seen from her, and the opposite of what I had anticipated when she was caught as the leak. I tilted my head at Valek, hoping to prompt an explanation.
"I was right, Valek. She sold the commander out for a gold coin. Check her pocket.
Margg urged.
Actually, Yelena came to me before the meeting. She believed she was going to expose you,
Valek said to Margg. Her gloating grin disappeared.
Why didn't you tell me?
She demanded.
No time.
Margg's not the leak? I asked, still confused.
No, Margg works for me. We've been feeding Star some rather unique information and hoping to find out who her other clients are. Star's been pestering Margg to get you involved, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to test your loyalty.
A complete understanding of Valek's ill temper snapped into my mind. He had expected me to betray him and the commander. How could he have believed that? I wondered. Didn't he know me at all? Anger, disappointment, and relief warred in my heart. I was unable to propel any words past my throat.
I had hoped to send this rat back to the dungeon where she belongs,
Margg complained to Valek.
Now she'll still be scurrying around. Still a threat.
Annoyed, she poked my arm with a meaty finger. I moved. In a heartbeat, I twisted her arm behind her back. She yelped as I raised her hand up high, forcing her to bend forward. I am not a rat, I said through clenched teeth. I've proved my loyalty. You will get off my back. No more nasty messages in the dust. No more prying into my things, or the next time, I'll break your arm. I shoved her hard as I released my grip. She stumbled and landed on the ground in a heap. Pink-faced, she lurched to her feet. As she opened her mouth to protest, Valek stopped her with a glance.
Well said, Yelena. Margg, you're dismissed,
Valek said. Margg's mouth snapped closed as she spun on her heel and left the room. She's not friendly, I said.
No, that is precisely why I like her.
He studied the door for a moment, then said,
Yelena, I'm going to show you something you're not going to like, but I think it's important that you know.
Oh yeah? Like I enjoyed your test of faith? Sarcasm rendered my voice sharp.
I warned you that I tested the food taster from time to time.
Before I could reply, he stopped me.
Be quiet and stay close behind me.
We went back out into the alley. Keeping in the shadows, we walked back to Star's house, where Valek guided me into a dark entrance within sight of Star's door.
The person who has been leaking information to Star is due to arrive soon,
Valek whispered close to my ear. His lips lightly rubbed my cheek. Shivers rippled down my spine at his touch, distracting me from what he had said. The impact of Valek's words didn't hit me until I saw a lone figure with an uneven gait walking down the street.